Well, that all tests up as fine. Those speeds are good. So I will put this little piece in place. This latch's job is to prevent you being able to depress the shutter release if the shutter is not actually cocked. And while I work on the rest of the shutter, I will put the retainer ring on the front to hold this all together. While I'm continuing with the rest, which mostly involves cleaning the outer shutter case, the curved rack and so forth, and putting them in place. But otherwise, here's the shutter all ready to go. Let's set that on 1 second and the self timer. Let's see what happens. It's running down. Sounds good to me. Right, let's get this together. First put that curved pusher in there and then get the curved rack into its place. Get that seated in the groove there correctly. Now, cocking the shutter and bringing that up to the case. That slide on. I didn't get that curved rack's not slid down correctly in its position. Hang on. Where's it gone? There we go. That's better. Now I've got to rotate this into position to get that flash contact seated in that little plastic groove there, that little holder. That's good. That's sitting correctly. 3 screws. The 2 countersunk head screws are different diameters. The larger diameter screw goes over here. The smaller diameter screw goes over here next to that cutout. If you mix them up, you won't enjoy the result. That's those 3 screws done. The flash contact needs just this screw, just helps clamp that together. Make sure that the contact's held in place correctly. Just looking at the position of that wire, I'm see if I can tuck that down slightly. It might be sitting a bit high. That's a bit better. I think it was in contact, but I've made sure it is now. Alright, that's the back of the shutter case. The front of the shutter case, we have our control rings. So I'll look at the state of these. They're quite clean to look at. If anything, they're probably a bit devoid of the usual grease. Mostly I'm just removing any old grease which is probably dried out and no longer doing a useful job, and any dust and grit that it may have picked up. This ring couples to the aperture settings. Here is the lens mount that the lens bayonets into. These little indentations here are the detent for the shutter speed settings, the click stops if you like. This is always smothered in graphite grease. It's a bugger to get off. It's everywhere on here. Most of it's doing absolutely nothing except making a mess. It was just the fashion of the day, And it's a bloody nuisance. All of this stuff in here, I'll just wipe that out. That's fine. And this little ring here, this is the ring that has the aperture settings numbers on it that appear at the top of the shutter. And this couples to the settings lever at the base of the shutter really. Here this is usually over greased too, and I'm just cleaning that out. Okay, so here, this piece, the bottom surface of this can certainly benefit with some lubricant, and typically I just wipe that with some molybdenum paste, and it doesn't need as much as that. Molybdenum paste, a little bit goes a very long way. If you're leaving a dirty mark on there with the paste, that is absolutely all you're going to need. There's no advantage in having great lumps of it about. It's not doing anything useful for you. So that clips into place there. Where's our shutter? Here's our aperture setting. Of course, this pin here has to drop into the fork on this lever. Get that in place. That chrome, is that gone? Now, there's a patch of chrome missing on there. I'm going to leave that exactly as it is. The brief is to service the camera, not make it look new. I'll leave that exactly as that is. It's just a tiny patch, and it doesn't affect the way the camera works. You'd have to be up really close to even see it. So I'll remove that. Here is the aperture number ring. It sits on there and couples to a tab on that inner ring there. That's sitting correctly. The detents here for the click stops for the shutter, I'll give that a wipe with some molybdenum paste. The lens mount ring drops in here, and it's got a little locating hole which fits over a pin. That's correctly positioned now. And the retaining ring should just screw on smoothly. Sometimes it's hard to get it started. That's started, and I just tighten this with the tip of a bamboo skewer, or a toothpick will do this nicely. And how tight should it be done up? Well, you should have positive click stops, but it shouldn't be stiff. It shouldn't be stiff to move that settings ring. So I'm just checking that. It seems okay. What happens if we go a little bit further? Oh, it's definitely too stiff. That position there. If it's too stiff, it might not even act like a click stop for the shutter speeds. It may be so stiff that it doesn't drop back into the next one as promptly as it might. I want a reasonable action there. I don't want it to be tight. No, that'll do nicely. That's all that's required. So, it's screw. That's got that tiny little black screw. Which locks the retaining ring and stops it from unscrewing. And this is quite hard to get tightened up. because it's quite hard to get the screwdriver in there square to the head of the screw and get the screw started correctly. But there, that's done. Today it went without any arguments. And I'll wipe around that surface there of that retaining ring, because I've had my greasy fingers all over that while I've got that ring seated. There's the shutter done. The lens. The lens needs to be cleaned and put back in the shutter. Now typically I use some naphtha to clean around the lens mount, not the glass, the mechanical parts here, the metal pieces, and I'm cleaning that. You can see oil and rubbish coming off on that. And the same at the rear. You can see that was even worse. Now sometimes you'll get some carry over to the glass surfaces, and they may have like a film of oil on them, which can be stubborn to get rid of with glass cleaner. But that's all you need usually, and I'm doing that now. I'll start with the front. I'm looking at that lens here. I can see from reflected light from the window beside me that there's a bit of a film on the inside of that front lens group, and you need to rotate the cotton bud as you go, so you're always presenting a new surface of cotton bud to the glass. And I'm looking out the window to see how that looks, see if the surface seems good. You do not want to risk picking up some fragment of grit and then grinding it into the glass. That wouldn't be a good thing. I'll fit that lens into the shutter body, and I'll clean the front surface and have another look again. It's much easier when you're looking in from the outside. It was just me releasing the shutter with my finger as I was holding it. That looks good. So the rear group. The inside surface doesn't look very bad. There's a suggestion of a oily haze there, but not much. Screw that into the body. And have a look at the outside of the rear group. Well, that's pretty good. That's fine. Just check that that's tight. That's our shutter done. Now, the retaining ring. Let's just check that that's clean. A little bit of dirt and grease there, nothing awful. And the shim. This is a very thick shim. It's uncommon to see a shim as thick as this, but presumably that's what was needed. The shim goes on there, and the shutter, we'll fit it back to the camera body and see how it goes. Alright, out with the block of wood, in with the camera body, drop the shutter into position. Bring that up to the closest focus distance. Check roughly the position of my cocking rack. I think about the curved rack. I think about there's a good place to start. press the film release button, hold down the lock lever. Did that cock the shutter? Not quite. So at least another tooth required there. So I'll lift the shutter out, move the curved rack forward one tooth, re-engage it, try again. That cocked that time, and the shutter fired. So the timing's correct. I can flip the camera over, holding everything in position, put in my retaining ring, take the spanner, run that down, check that the shutter's seated correctly, check that it cocks. It does, and I can tighten that retaining ring now. Here we go. That part's good to go. Next up, rangefinder. Rangefinder. Anything odd about this? It's a little bit hazy, that's all. If I was doing a very non-invasive cleaning, I would remove the eyepiece here at the back, which is just a single screw, clean both sides of that piece of glass. The front glass here, you can clean that, both sides. That's probably all I'd do. If I was feeling a bit more adventurous, I would clean the front surface of the semi-silvered lens here. The front surface, the one facing towards the front of the camera, that's plain glass. The silvering's on the back face. Do not touch that. You touch that, you won't like the result. Here we have the front surface mirror. Don't touch that with anything. That's in quite good order. That'll be getting a light clean as I clean the semi-silvered mirror in the body in the ultrasonic cleaner. But I will not be touching that surface with anything, not a cotton bud, not a soft cloth, not a brush, nothing at all. It marks exceptionally easily. So this has got to come apart for my cleaning purposes. The important things to note: if you're going to clean something like this in an ultrasonic cleaner, the little mask here, the pellicle that's got the frame lines on it, that's got to come out first. If you don't take that out first, it's not going to go well for you. The ultrasonic cleaner will clean all your lines away. So there's a single screw here. I'll undo that. This is a shim. There's a shim at the back to adjust the position of this thing. It goes underneath this tab. I lift that pellicle thing out completely, that little frame lines thing. If that's damaged, it's a bugger. If it's a piece of film, as far as I can tell. It's got a very delicate surface. Any holes there show as bright lines. Any cracks show as bright lines. If you've got more bright lines showing on your finder than you should, it's because there's a fault there. You can get in with some black paint on a tiny end of a pin or something, and you can cover up the lines you do not wish to see if there are cracks in it. You can even modify it in the same way, so it's only got the frame lines for the standard lens. But it's a one-way process. If you do it, it's not coming back if you have a change of heart. So the rear piece here for the viewfinder, single screw. I'm looking at that screw. I'm looking at its mate too. Right, yeah, one of those screws is not what I would normally expect to see in this position. Normally they're slightly rounded. That's okay. This is a better screw for the job, and they may well have started using it late in production. I don't know. Here, this is the swivel. This is where it moves from, and I've got a tool here for undoing things like that if I get it adjusted correctly. A stiff pair of tweezers may well do that for you. Now normally I would mark the position of the bush in the centre here so that it went back in exactly the same location, which just makes for possibly less need for making adjustments or smaller adjustments. That just popped out of position, so it's obviously loose, so that really wasn't an option, and we'll just deal with it. I'm just wiping this surface with a bit of naphtha to remove any oil or grease. You can see that's pretty clean. That was like that was dry. I'll wipe this surface. This is the surface that runs over that piece. Again, that's pretty clean. It's like there was no lubricant there. I'll run around the inside edge of that. The little brass bush, I'm running around that. Again, there's nothing to see. It's like it's not lubricated. The wavy washer, yeah, I'm not getting much dirt off this. Normally these parts are fairly dirty with old lubricant. The retaining screw, that looks clean too. So whoever put that together was exceptionally sparing with the lubricant. This is the part that goes into the ultrasonic cleaner. You have to be quite sparing with the cleaning. I give that 3 minutes in warm water with a drop of dishwashing detergent, and once it's had its 3 minutes I pull it out, run it under the hot tap, rinse it all away, blow all the droplets off and dry it with a hairdryer, using the blower on there at all times to keep any droplets from forming, because any droplets that you leave on there and let dry will leave coffee ring type marks on there. Now one further thing I'm going to do here, because I can see a need for it, is the front surface of the semi-silvered mirror, the one that's plain glass. That's quite dirty in this case, and I'm going to clean that before I'll put this in the ultrasonic cleaner, for the simple reason that I don't want to have to clean this for any longer than I absolutely need to in the ultrasonic cleaner, otherwise it will damage the silvered surface. So I need to give it minimal cleaning, and so any surfaces that I can clean before I put it in there, like this one, it's the only one, I'll clean that first. That's fine. I'll go and clean this. I'll be back.